उस पर हर एक नजर है, बदरो दुजा यही है। उस पर हर एक नजर है, बदरो दुजा यही है। पहले तो राह में हारे, पार उसने है उतारे। पहले तो
Sahib says, Sahib, whenever you're ready.
Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. We will start the program with tilawat. I will request Sahib Awan Sahib, Naib Sahib to lead us in tilawat, please.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير. قالت الأعراب آمنا قل لم تؤمنوا ولكن قولوا أسلمنا ولما يدخل الإيمان في قلوبكم وإن تطيعوا الله ورسوله لا يلتكم من أعمالكم شيئا إن الله غفور رحيم. إنما المؤمنون الذين آمنوا بالله ورسوله ثم لم يرتابوا وجاهدوا بأموالهم وأنفسهم في سبيل الله أولئك هم الصادقون. I seek refuge with Allah from Satan the accursed. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the ever merciful. O mankind, we have created you from a male and a female, and we have made you into tribes and sub-tribes that you may recognize one another. Verily, the most honorable among you in the sight of Allah is he who is the most righteous among you. Surely Allah is all-knowing, all-aware. The Arabs of the desert say, we believe. Say you have not believed yet, but rather say, we have accepted Islam. For the true belief has not entered into your hearts yet. But if you obey Allah and His Messenger, He will not detract anything from your deeds. Surely Allah is most forgiving, merciful. The believers are only those who truly believe in Allah and His Messenger, and then doubt not, but strive with their possessions and their persons in the cause of Allah. It is they who are truthful. Jazakallah.
Jazakumullah. I'm very thankful to all of the participants who are here today. We're coming to a close of this MKA Reflects program. I'm very thankful to Rahman Nasser Sahib, who initially came up with the idea of this MKA Reflects and has led the program this past weekend. We've heard from various Jamaat members, from converts on their journey to Islam, Ahmadiyyat, and their love of Khilafat and the guidance that they've received through Khilafat as well. Many things are happening around us today. The pandemic is happening, the riots are happening around the country. And by the grace of Allah, we have accepted the Imam of the age, and our Khilafat is our lifeline, and we need to heed the instructions of Khalifatul Masih. I'm very excited that we have our respected missionary in charge, Sahib, Naib Ameer Sahib, Azhar Haneef Sahib, who's going to address us now. And I will turn it over to Naib Ameer Sahib to take over.
Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Dear respected Sadr of Khudam al Ahmadiyya, Dr. Madil Abdullah Sahib, and all of our dear brothers of Majlis Khudam al Ahmadiyya, and anyone else of any other Majlis that happens to be joining this program. It is indeed an important milestone in terms of history that we are past this year of 2020. This is our centennial year. It means we as a Jamaat in USA have been established for 100 long years. And that itself is a moment for reflection. That itself is a time for self-assessment and an assessment of one's communal strength, whether we still continue to live up to the mission which led it to our existence, and which was the mission of many of those who discussed this last weekend, joining the Jamaat Ahmadiyya by Allah's grace and mercy, and countless souls before them, thousands and thousands, tens of thousands who in America alone joined this community. The reflection also extends to our future. And in this sense, I wanted to start by sharing a similar moment in time when a great luminary of Jamaat Ahmadiyya, Chaudhry Zafar Khan Sahib, was also reflecting at a juncture of time when something had passed and something was coming into being. And this was the moment when Mirza Bashir Ahmad Sahib had passed away. Allah be pleased with him. And Chaudhry Zafar Khan Sahib was in deep, deep contemplation as to what we have so far achieved in the goal, the objective of our community, Jamaat Ahmadiyya. And in this sense, I think it's appropriate for us to listen to his words today to begin this reflection, so to speak. He says, 50 years ago, this was in 1963, 50 years ago, we were few in numbers and poor in material resources, but we were full of vigor and rich in moral and spiritual values. Therein lay our strength. That strength constituted the justification for our high hopes. The generation that was then in the course of passing out could transfer its responsibilities with confidence to those upon whose shoulders they're about to fall. Is that the situation today also? Now, this is the question he poses in 1963, thinking at that time the Jamaat, the community, was perhaps slowly lagging behind the original pace and energy and spirit of that smaller community that was surrounding the Prophet Messiah alayhi salam initially. And also he was concerned that the new group coming into being who was going to take charge, they also were perhaps not fully aware of the burden that's about to be thrust upon their shoulders and able to stand and carry that burden forward as the elders who had passed away had done. So he says again, is that the situation today also? Back then, small in number, but full of that spirit of moral and spiritual values. He says again, if the true answer to this question can be a clear and resounding yes, affirmative, we have nothing to fear. And in 2020, if we're going to also answer the question that we feel right now, we have the same moral and spiritual vigor and values of our elders who passed away in this previous century, then right now we have absolutely nothing to fear. Whether we are Khadam or Nasser or the Lajna or a Tifl or Nasirat, whatever we may be, if we feel we have retained that spirit and we're carrying forward that energy and we are engaged as they were engaged, then yes, with that reflection, we should feel quite confident that our future is bright and our progress is already guaranteed, as we have seen in the past. So this concept concludes by saying, if this is not the true answer, we must reflect deeply. So the Sahib has called this session our session to reflect. So he's saying, if this is not the answer, we must reflect deeply, prayerfully, and in utter sincerity how to improve the situation. We must remind ourselves of the divine law that all divine promises demand for their fulfillment the fullest and most sincere response from those in whom and through whom those promises have to find their fulfillment. The first century of Islam was a shining and conclusive illustration of this. Now, by Allah's grace, in the last number of months and years, so to speak, our beloved Qutb Masih al-Khamis, may Allah strengthen his hand, has been talking about that first century of Islam, and in particular, those companions who went forth into the field of defense of Islam with their lives, who laid down everything for the sake of this community, that it will be in its initial stages protected by their blood, their sacrifices, their services to Islam, protecting the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, and ensuring that there is a foundation upon which Islam is to be built. We know that took place. There's so many wonderful examples that have been given by Azhar in his sermons, and alhamdulillah, he's giving these examples for us to draw examples from for our own inspiration, and to fall in line and follow the footsteps of these beloved companions, as he's mentioned. The same could be truly said about the first century of Jamaat Ahmadiyya in general. Those early companions that surrounded Prophet Messiah alayhi salam and their tremendous sacrifices. But as you can see in the narrative of Choti Zafar Khan, he was becoming concerned just after some 50 years of the beginning of Caliphate, that it's waxing and waning. We're beginning to lose that spirit, that energy, that commitment, that desire to sacrifice everything for the sake of this mission and to ensure the life of that mission will continue, even if it means my death. It means, as we say in the Quran pledged, giving up everything, time, property, honor, wealth, children, everything is going to be sacrificed in that cause. So again, it's a great moment as the Qudam al-Ahmadiyya, we're reflecting upon this centenary and what it means to us as young men, as Qudam al-Ahmadiyya going forward, and how should we always remember the stories, not just of the recent converts, but the converts who joined this fold from the very beginning. And in that sense, today I wanted not to speak so much about my own personal journey or any journey within, you could say that it relates to me. I wanted to share again in the words of some of these converts whose lives and legacies still reach out to us from that first century, whose deeds and accomplishments give us a clear personification of that moral and spiritual energy and dedication to Khilafat, to Jamaat. In spite of the fact that, again, this is a reflection today. Think where we are in 2020. Today we're meeting virtually online because we can't come together physically owing to the pandemic that's causing everyone to be in this shutdown state. And we haven't had, as a result, a congregational experience in prayer for a long time. We don't have the capacity to have a jalsa, ijtima. We can't have children's programs together. There's so many things happening right now on our Jamaat in the USA that prevents us from being community. And if you can just, again, imagine how difficult that is for us, but how much more it was for those converts 100 years ago, 50 years ago, when, as you can imagine, they never had an ijtima, not a single one growing up. They never had jalsas. For the first decades of this Jamaat, there was no jalsa at all in USA. There was no children's classes to go to. In fact, in many places, there wasn't even a mission house or a mosque to congregate in. They were meeting in storefronts that were being rented, and then when you missed payments or you can't afford something or want something big, you move on. So we were like Bedouins. We were moving from place to place and trying to establish ourselves and get a footing, but really it was a movement that didn't have homes, that didn't have centers, that didn't have gatherings. So again, today, for us to reflect what kind of faith that person must have had, who couldn't watch a video screen of Dr. Masih delivering a sermon or giving a speech, or watching all these wonderful programs coming to them online or through satellites. There was no satellite service. There was no online service. There was nothing barely in terms of literature even for them to read and to gain knowledge about their faith. So this was a pure faith. This was extreme challenges that all of these converts had to endure, as the early converts of Islam had to endure. They left their families, they left their homes, they left their livelihoods, and they went into this almost state of isolation as we're facing now, where they were all alone with their faith. Sometimes the husband or the wife wasn't a member of the community. Sometimes the family was opposing them and giving them all kinds of pressures to return back to the faith of Christianity or whatever they left behind. And the social construct was all kind of different. So there were many challenges that we can reflect upon right now as we're in this state of isolation in our homes, unable to attend mosques or meetings, having istimas or jalsas, to appreciate the faith of our forefathers, that first century of Ahmadiyya, to stand up in this kind of challenge and maintain their belief in a person they never see, a Khalifa, to remain connected to a community that really is so distant and fragmented around the country that it's almost impossible to meet on a regular basis to form community. In that sense, I wanted to start by sharing some glimpses of our early members who speak about the challenges of faith, but the vision they had and the commitment, dedication they had to this Ahmadiyya community, in spite of the fact of all of what I'm discussing, that alhamdulillah, this is the moment for us to realize, to carry forward the spirit they had and the dedication they had and the determination, despite all these odds and opposition, into this new century, then, as Chaudhry Zafar Khan Sahib said, we should feel quite confident and we should feel quite comfortable that our future progress is guaranteed. So I would like to share a few clips and then make a few comments. And we will go back in history into the words and the images of some of our great pioneers who were part of us in this last century. I request if we can show that first clip, and then we'll make some comments.
La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah.
One of the things that happened to me personally was that when I signed the bayat to the Ahmadiyya movement in Islam, there was no doubt in my mind that I was doing the right thing. But imagine, and I'm talking about converts, people who revert back to Islam, Ahmadiyya, true Islam. Imagine going home and telling your mother that you have a new name, that your name is no longer Maurice, your name is Munir. Can you imagine the impact that has on a mother who named you herself and chose a name for you, and you tell her you have a better name? Imagine, for instance, a person like myself who is considered as a mama's boy going home to a Baptist mother and telling her that Jesus did not die on the cross. Can you imagine how she felt to hear those words? So much sadness came over her. It was so amazing that we stopped speaking to each other for almost 7 years. 7 years. But not a day went by during those 7 years that I thought for a moment that I had made a mistake in joining the Ahmadiyya movement in Islam. Nothing happens just by chance. Nothing happens just by chance.
16-year-old young man, a teenager, someone who would be a khadam, roaming the streets of America. As you can imagine, there are so many teenagers roaming the streets of America today without any moral direction or spiritual allegiance to any particular group, running around with the crowd, getting involved in all of the activities that they will be involved in, including use of intoxicants and everything else. And someone comes along and gives him a message that slowly turns his heart and his mind and makes him curious to learn more about this. He's given a book to read, The Philosophy of the Teachings of Islam, and that changes his life. This 16-year-old boy would then say that he wanted to join the community, but because he was so young, he had to get permission from his mother signed on that document, the bayat form. And his mother refuses. So he says, I was determined to join, so I decided to forge her signature. And the missionary tells him that, look, God sees everything you do, so this is not the way to enter this fold. Ultimately, he becomes a member of this community at the age of 16. Now, why I keep emphasizing this young age? Many of our converts who joined our fold. They are your contemporaries. They were your classmates, your colleagues you would run around and play ball with or go to the gym with. They were the ones you would see hanging out here and there in the malls, on the street corners, wherever. They're the ones who are all around us in our society, but again, without any kind of anchor or mooring. Someone came along and tapped this young man on his shoulder at the age of 16, and he would go on to become eventually a president of a Jamaat, Philadelphia, a Naib Ameer of our community, and the first national Qaid of Khuddam al-Ahmadiyya USA. This was the effect of someone not seeing him just as a small boy passing by on a street corner, but a soul to be given the message of Islam Ahmadiyya. And what a message entered his heart, that this was his legacy he left behind for all of us, which we remember, but we forget the humble origin of this man, our late Naib Ameer, former National Qaid of Khuddam al-Ahmadiyya and Sadr of Philadelphia Jamaat for many, many years, Munir Hamid Sahib. So let us reflect on that today as our mission going forward, to reach out to the youth of America. And if we will tap one today, you don't know who that person may be tomorrow. And therefore, the element of transforming an individual and an entire community is literally within the power of us saying a word or giving someone the words of truth. Again, the next clip is of someone many of us would know and recognize. He was a very prominent member of our Jamaat, and he is one who speaks about this message of propagating Islam and Ahmadiyya.
My whole activity from my time or my journey was Tabligh. I love it, I do it all the time and been doing it since day one, Tabligh. You know what Tabligh is? Preaching. But if I look around here and what I see, I would think you don't know much about Tabligh, because look at your audience. I mean, this place should be so full to all the parking lots should be full of people. If you had the spirit, you got the truth. Ahmadiyya is truth. Ahmadiyya is the light. Ahmadiyya is guidance. But where are the preachers?
Let us reflect again. Let us reflect again. Brother Rashid Ahmad, American, as he was known, never one to mince words. He spoke directly, as you would find the spirit of our elders from the last generation. They had no time to play with words. They were very direct, and they came in front of you with what they found was their truth. He's saying the same thing as Zafar Khan Sahib is saying, and this was the last Jalsa in which he was able to deliver an address a number of years ago. He stood on that stage in Jalsa and he asked the entire audience that, are we still holding true to our original message and mission to propagate Islam Ahmadiyya to the corners of the earth? This was the mission of Prime Messiah. I will cause your message to reach the entire corners of the earth. So he's part of this message, because when he was a young man, again running the streets of America, he hears about this thing called Islam, and he wants to come and be part of it. So he's going and visiting the mission house, and they're wondering, because this man is dressed quite nicely, a young man dressed nicely, but doesn't seem to have a job or anything. So where's he getting his money from? Naturally, at that time, Brother Rashid was involved in the streets in America, and all of the, let's say, non conformative activities of the streets. So he had a lot of cash flow coming in, and he would wear nice clothes. The missionaries were so concerned about him, they would kind of question, and finally one missionary says, okay, if you say you're here, show me your house. And Brother Rashid said he took him out to a park bench and pointed to the bench and says, this is my house, this is where I live. The missionary was, of course, floored. How is it possible? But what he meant to say is, my life prior to Islam basically was one in the streets. And this is that corner in the street which I claim as my territory. But ultimately, again, he would accept the faith, go on, leave the country, get trained in Pakistan, come back as the first African-American missionary of USA, and then become the first president, Ameer of Jamaat Ahmadiyya USA, and serve as president and in other capacities for many, many years. Again, the reflection today is, he's telling us, there are people out in the streets of America that should be within our fold. Why is it that our fold doesn't reflect that diversity? If we have the spirit again, if we have that commitment, because we know we have the truthful message. So the point today here again is thinking deeply within our own selves, not looking around us, within our own hearts and souls, that are we also prepared to make that commitment like our generation that's passed on, and pass the baton on to us. Describing what it means to preach, because a lot of times you hear people concerned that, oh, I don't have a lot of knowledge, I don't have a lot of ability to answer arguments, this and that. The next person who's going to address us as an elder, if this was the question asked, well, how do I preach in America? How were you effective in preaching? He gives the answer to this question in a remarkable way to make us understand all of us can be preachers in America if we have the heart and soul and spirit. So let's listen to Brother Munir Ahmed Sahib of St. Louis Jamaat talk to us about being a preacher in America.
It's the way you conduct yourself. It causes people to first accept what they see in you. They accept what they see in you. If you're not presenting yourself in a way that cause them to accept you, you can't propagate to them successfully. See? They got to see it in your actions.
Again, he goes on and speaks further about this great mission, this great task, or he calls it a job, for each and every one of us in this Jamaat USA, part of Jamaat Ahmadiyya. If we can continue with his clip, please.
Nice. You got a big job. You got a big job to make this community Muslims. Now that's gonna mean you're gonna be working and doing things while others are having what they call a good time. It happened to me. So you're gonna be doing work while they are playing, but you're gonna find that somebody's gonna have to do it.
Someone has to do it, right? And those who were called in the first era of Islam primarily were youth who came forward and accepted faith. We're seeing the same thing in this presentation. Munir Ahmed Sahib, very young man when he accepts Islam, 16 years of age. Brother Rashid Ahmed, again, young man. Munir Ahmed from St. Louis. All of these were young people. If you look across the board, in fact, it was the energy of the youth movement in America and people who were in that age of Qudam, that range. They were the change agents. They were the ones who were joining us by Allah's grace. And so this is why Hazur keeps addressing the Qudam and addressing Jamaat and saying, Tabligh is really a youth activity. That is a time we all know. You know from college, you know from school, you know from the formative years of life, people are ready to make transformations within themselves. They're ready to convert from one system to another. And how that conversion takes place, really, as Brother Munir Ahmad Sahib says, is not so much by the arguments we present, but by the role model we present, carrying ourselves. And this is what they did again. I'm always so impressed by my elders who, at a time when there was extreme opposition, there was people who were virulent against this idea of Islam spreading in America. And there was no support anywhere. There's no network to fall back on. You're on your own. If these were the women, they were veiling themselves, as Huzur mentioned last Friday in the khutbah of one American lady who veiled herself in her area, and she was the only one to veil. You can imagine what that pressure was like for her to maintain that identity. I've heard this discussion many times now, and then over the course of the last number of years, the Muslim identity in the West and how to maintain it, how to preserve it. Imagine preserving your identity in a West where you had no one around you, absolutely no one, who looked like you, who had a name like you, had a culture like you, had a faith like you. There was no one around you. You're the only one in the classroom. You're the only one in the college. You're the only one in the neighborhood. You're the only one in a job. You're the only person in that area that has a faith. But because of that, you're unique. You stand out. You're like the diamond in the rough. You just glow naturally because people will turn and see something different in you. And that's the source of attraction when it's something that is beauty to observe, something that people have been looking for that they didn't find in others. Not trying to go along with the crowd, but to stand out is what he's saying by our moral and spiritual values. Again, hearkening right back to what Zafrullah Khan Sahib said in the beginning. If our moral and spiritual values are strong, our future is bright. If that is weakened, if we have assimilated into the West, then there is the danger. And the next person who's going to address us, our dear brother Bilal Abdul Salam, he has addressed this particularly toward the youth of the need to stay true to our identity and to spread ourselves in our society by being truthful in this sense. So let's, it's a longer clip. He has a number of points, which I hope you listen very carefully, but we can benefit much from them.
We loved Islam so much, and we loved being around each other so much, till we just accepted anyone. And every time someone saw us, they always saw us smiling. Because what? Because we loved Islam, especially Islam and Ahmadiyya. And we were the only Muslims in my area in Philadelphia. You had the black Muslims there, but they was considered following the true teachings of Islam. People used to look at us, laugh at us. We used to walk the streets and give out pamphlets. They used to go around the corner and throw them away, and we used to backtrack and go pick them up and redistribute them again. We loved Islam so much too, we just couldn't sleep at night. We used to get up. Every morning we get up, we call each other. You see how we was doing? Did you get up for Salat this morning? Just checking on each other. This is what we done in Muslims as converts. We loved it. And when we saw someone from Pakistan, we grabbed him. Why did we grab him? Because especially if he came from Rabwa, We said, this brother knows what Islam and Ahmadiyya is. We're gonna talk to him. We're gonna try to get him to teach us. Because we had one missionary, and he couldn't be all over America at one time. And so that brother, Manawa Sahib, who is now in Washington, D.C., came to Philadelphia. And when he came to Philadelphia, he was the only Pakistani in our group at that particular time. And we told him, we said, well, you are a guest. He said, I'm not a guest. He said, I'm a member, I'm an Ahmadi. So he became our educational secretary. He taught me my Arabic, how to read the Quran. He taught us all about what Islam and Ahmadiyya was about. We are the new peoples who's going to change the world. You hear a lot of folks talking about the new world order. You're looking at it. You are the new world order. When the promised Messiah came on the scene, that began the new world order. We accept the promised Messiah. We have a job to do. Let us not fail that job. Let us not get into the culture of this country and lose what the promised Messiah has brought to us. Is that what I see happening to some of our young men? Don't forget your Islam. When you're praying, don't forget to cover your heads. I see too many young men sitting around here with their kufis off while they are praying. Try to do things properly according to Islam, because if you're going to be a leader, you have to be the first one to make and show people how they are supposed to carry themselves and how their life is supposed to be lived. You are the ones. So be a leader in your group or in the crowd or wherever you go to school. You be the leader. Because you're standing in the hand of the Almighty Allah Ta'ala.
I appreciate so much my dear brother Bilal Abdul Salam. I spent many, many years in Philadelphia with him. He was also at one point a devotee and spent time serving as an imam in Baltimore area. And his spirit, his love for this community was second to none. And in this sense, you can hear him speaking to the youth in particular, that if there's going to be a change of a new world order, and that was the mission of Promised Messiah. This is something the last generation, the last century membership understood. We had been given this grand task to create a new heaven and earth, as was articulated by Promised Messiah alayhi salam in his writings. And he's saying that who then, if not us, is going to create that new heaven and earth? And that question is still being rhetorically asked today. As we look around our nation, around the world, who is going to create and transform our society from injustice to justice, from war to peace, from all of the imbalance to harmony? Who are the ones who are to bring back spiritual values, to establish a moral code that people not just articulate, but they actually live by that code across the board? This was the calling that entered the hearts of this, our first generation. And by Allah's grace, they were so desperate to leave that behind as the number one legacy for us to carry forward into the next century. I want to share again from the statement. I don't have a video to share, but I wanted to read the statement of one of those early converts the last century, Omar Bilal Ibrahim, speaking about Qudam al-Ahmadiyya. He was part of the Qudam in the early years when it was established. Again, nothing like what you see now. There was, no formal organization in the sense of all these, Qaideen and Nazamin and an organization and networking and meetings and all that. It was a very loose knit, in a sense, beginning of the organization, but the spirit and energy in them was second to none. Again, he speaks about joining the community and then being part of this. He says, quote, "I have been elected to several offices in the Ahmadiyya movement, including local president." This is the New York Jamaat. However, I do not think that any of these offices was as fulfilling as being a member of Qudam al-Ahmadiyya. He says, this branch in Ahmadiyya was the answer to all the challenges, cultural and political of that time. Again, let me repeat that, because this is the essence of what he felt was being a Khadim. He says, this branch in Ahmadiyya was the answer to all the challenges, cultural and political of that time. It's still true today. It's going to be the answer to all of the challenges we face in our society and our world now and going forward. It is the backbone of the community. It is the organization to carry it forward. He says again, the Qudam at that time were hustling with young lions. And the activities we were involved in kept us always in new ventures. For example, Brother Munir Hamid, Brother Abdul Salam, Nuruddin Abdul Latif, Jalaluddin Abdul Latif, Akbar Tashakar, Bilal Sunni Ali, Ahmad Bashir, and others got together to publish a monthly paper called The Real Revolution. This paper was edited by Brother Munir Hamid, and the title was taken from the book of the second Khalifa entitled Inqilabi Haqiqi, The Real Revolution. This was our way of combating the publications put out by other groups at that time. It created incitement amongst the Qudam and soon became quite a tool for propagation. The members who were active in Qudam back then are still active. Some of the members whom we thought were not as active grew to become active leaders of the Jamaat for the purpose of establishing Ahmadiyyat, the true Islam in America. So he's saying that that small group of young men would get together and they had an energy, a passion, a dedication to spread this message, and to establish this mission far and wide. And as Brother Bilal said, you could feel the energy that was amongst them, the joy they had to be together and to form at last a group that was going to be on the cusp of a revolution. Not a political revolution, not a social revolution, not an economic, financial revolution. It was going to be a spiritual, real revolution. And this is in the essence of the book of the second Khalifa, which I'll quote later as we come to conclusion. But again, a moment of reflection. Qudam today and Qudam of that last century. To draw from their examples now is what's going to help us to go forward in this new century of Ahmadiyya and enter America again with a messaging that still addresses the issues of the day from their perspective of Islam. By Allah's grace and mercy again, if we reflect today and go back 100 years, go back 100 years ago today and think about what's happening in our nation. We had just come back from World War I. And so you had veterans of the war settling into cities. And during the war, there were mass migrations of groups from one part of the country to another, particularly from the southern part of the nation. African Americans migrated up northeast into the Midwest, into factories, were getting jobs, establishing communities. And so this was the beginning in the 1918-19 period, where you had this migration of people into cities seeking a better way of life. Again, what else was happening? You had immigration coming in, but there was a pushback to keep these Southern European immigrants out because they would do what? Take the jobs, fill the factories, take over the docks, and all these things. So there was again an anti-immigrant backlash from out of Europe, and of course out of Asia. And under any of these nations, no one wanted them to come in. Third thing, very shortly is going to be the Spanish flu pandemic, ravaging the nation and the whole world. So you have migration of populations, immigration issues, you have a pandemic going on, a war that just ended, but more talk about, again, the construct in the world, the social imbalance of nations. So nations are rebuilding, and there's the seeds for the next war is actually being been laid. But on top of all that, you have an individual who sinned in the midst of a pandemic breaking out during the wartime, just ending. America is trying to create a new social construct in which those who had fought for America in the World War are coming back home, particularly African Americans, but pre-war attitudes were again flourishing now. So during 1918 and 1919, there were riots throughout America with the communities trying to prevent African Americans being established, getting jobs, and in a sense, attaining that great American dream that we talk about, equality and justice for all. So 1919 was called the Red Summer. In Chicago, the Red Summer wound up to have riots for 13 long days and nights. 1,000 people got displaced from their homes. 500 were injured, and about 65 or so were killed in these riots. And this is something, again, had to do with the racial tensions in America in 1919, just after the World War I. And during this time, again, when the pandemic is about to break out, all these challenges are here. And what does Tecumseh II do? He gives a message to our first missionary to go to aboard a boat and go to America and preach Ahmadiyyat. So 6 months after the Red Summer, when there was so much bloodshed, this was the worst rioting ever in the history of our country during that summer. It was after all this unrest and upheaval because of the World War. It was a time when America is again is trying to find its new balance, and our missionary comes to preach the message of Islam Ahmadiyyat in America. A daunting task, no doubt. But by the grace and mercy of Allah, he was that person that Charles Zafar Khan talked about. He had the highest of moral values, the highest of spiritual values, the greatest attention toward prayer and focusing on God Almighty as the source of his strength. And within a very short time, what he finds is the very people who are the most excluded from American society, particularly African Americans, they began to join him in the largest numbers. And this is the foundation that we see started by him and continue throughout this last entire century of people who are young, who are vibrant, who are desirous for a new heaven and earth in our nation. They joined this fold and began building the future that we are now part of, and we are going to be asked to carry forward in the next century. By Allah's grace and mercy, again, this is truly one of the greatest moments, therefore, of reflection for all of us, to step back and not just think about that, we're sitting right now in a stage where we're in a lockdown. There's a pandemic. There's rioting going on in the streets of America. There's all kinds of challenges around us. We don't have jobs. We don't have security, financial security. There's talk about, again, nations who are in tension with other nations in conflict, and perhaps there will be wars again. Soldiers are still abroad. There are all kinds of potential flashpoints are there for us, again, to witness what was witnessed 100 years ago. The question only remains is, today, if Mufti Muhammad Sadiq Sahib entered America, he would not have seen hardly anything different than what he saw in 1920, other than larger numbers and greater dynamics. But the situation is still the same. He didn't leave that boat, send a message back to Tecumseh that, Hazur, right now, It doesn't seem to be the best timing, so let me go back home. In fact, some of his relatives, when they heard he was going to get on the boat in the first place to leave India and go to England, they tried to convince Mufti Muhammad Sadiq Sahib, this is poor timing because there's a war going on now. That boat will be destroyed in the ocean. You won't even reach England. So you should probably go and humbly request Azhar to delay that request. Mufti Sahib said to his relatives and all who had that sentiment, there is absolutely no way I am going to tell Ameer al-Mu'mineen I refuse to accept his order. There's absolutely no way I'm going to put my life ahead of the life of this community. Two things can happen. A, I will get on that boat and I will reach my destination. And if they detain me and imprison me, I will still preach. Or B, I'll get on that boat and if it's an enemy ship will destroy it, so be it. I will have given my life in the way of Allah. And what do I care? Because I don't hold this world and this life to have that much value and meaning to me. This was the spirit of Mufti Sahib. This was a spirit that was infused into the early converts of our Jamaat Ahmadiyya. All the daunting challenges, many of them stood up to them, and they had that spirit that no matter what, we are going to go out into the streets of America and preach and propagate our message and build this new heaven and earth on our blood, sweat, and tears. We are going to be the ones to create a transformation in American society. And this is what is the calling of our Jamaat in this day and age. This is the calling of us as a community now. I want to again remind us of what our beloved Qudusi al-Khamis gave us as a centennial message. And this message, therefore, is what would have been given to Mufti Muhammad Sadiq Sahib, leaving India into England and coming to America. That what is your goal? He says in this centennial message of this year, again reminding us, exactly 100 years ago today, exactly 100 years ago today, on February 15, Hazrat Mufti Muhammad Sadiq Sahib, may Allah be pleased with him, arrived there with the message of the promised Messiah. And the spirit and enthusiasm with which he worked, many virtuous souls entered the fold of Islam Ahmadiyya. Unfortunately, their progenies went far away from Ahmadiyyat, and the Jamaat could not retain them. This is what we see now. We look around, what Brother Rashid Ahmed was saying, that as I look around the crowd nowadays in our Jamaat, something has changed dramatically. If you look at all the images, the photos, if you look at the description of what we were initially, there was a very strong tone and tenor of local people joining us. There was nothing wrong with people coming from outside, but local people were joining us in droves. In fact, I heard an account that at one point, do you realize there were more Ahmadis in America than we have now, even this day in 2020? Think about that. In the last century, we had more Ahmadis at one point in the USA than we have even today. And that's striking to say how much work was being put into spreading our message in those early decades. And then slowly, that effort to reach out and propagate our message has not captured us with the same energy, the same passion as our elders. So as Azhar is saying, as a result, we lost generation after generation of the converts' children and grandchildren and their families. Some are still there. Some are still on the fringes and the margins of our Jamaat, but many have drifted so far away, perhaps they don't even know that their forefathers, grandmothers and grandfathers and uncles and aunts and whoever they may have been, were even part of Ahmadiyya Jamaat. So as we were saying, with this background, therefore, my first message is that with the same spirit and enthusiasm using all your faculties, you should get involved today once again in giving the message of Islam Ahmadiyya to the people of America. Who in particular have I been saying of the American people have joined us in the past and probably right now are waiting for somebody to come and tap them on the shoulder, give them a message, show them something that will spark their curiosity and lead them toward this path of Islam Ahmadiyya. That is the youth. Youth have joined us in the first fold of Islam during the time of the Prophet Muhammad SAW. Youth joined in the second wave, and youth have joined us in our country here in America in greater number than anyone else. It doesn't mean that elders do not join. The elders do join. But the larger majority of people, have we seen, movements are those who are younger. So this is something, again, that I say the first message, the same spirit and enthusiasm of Mufti Muhammad Sadiq Sahib, or early converts, the voices and messages we already heard today, to preach just from our own, you could say, good moral qualities. Being a good neighbor, a good worker, being a person who is admired as the bread earner and the father in a family, who's taking care of the wife and the children in admirable ways, which again in America seems to be a given. It's no longer a given. Those values have weakened in America so much so that you hardly now can find nuclear families together intact, and children with two parents raising up being raised up by two parents. All these things are great values that people are searching. That where are they? Lost values. Again, as Lewis says, second message, find and bring back the lost generations of those virtuous souls that we could not retain earlier. We should connect with them and bring them back in the lap of Ahmadiyya. So these are two missions given to us by Al-Khaliq Masih, going forward in a new century. And today is a day of reflection. Today is not a day of us to just sit back on our laurels and listen to the stories of accomplishments of the past and be satisfied. Alhamdulillah, as I said, I haven't even covered the tip of an iceberg of all these powerful stories of those, our elders, who joined us in the sacrifices they made and the services they did for our cause. But at the same time, by Allah's grace, what I feel right now is the most important calling. Our whole nation, the world is calling this. Where are those people again who are ready to serve? Where are those youth who are ready to go out like a Munir Hamid, like a Bilal Abdul Salam, like a Rashid Ahmed, like a Munir Ahmed, so many all across this country, men and women, young and old. This is the time now not to feel so comfortable in our quarters, in our lockdown state, and just send little messages here and there and be done with it. This is the time to really take advantage of a moment in our nation where our nation is suffering and hurting at the deepest core levels of society, where we can see the pain and suffering in people, the pain of the racial disharmony that's still there, the pain of the economic disparity that's still there, the pain of the gender situation that's still there, the pain of all these political imbalances that are still there. Again, I ask you the question, who is going to create the new heaven and earth? Prophet Messiah al-Islam said, this was my mission. This was my role to fulfill the task that the Prophet Muhammad came to be a mercy for all mankind. So with that in mind, again, look around today, see the opportunities that are presenting before our eyes every single moment. Young people who are waiting for someone to come and deliver this message, and let us try our best to also call back those who slowly, for whatever reasons, have drifted away or who are not aware that their families were part of this Ahmadiyya movement in Islam. You can imagine today, I think a lot of the Asian families, immigrants from Pakistan and India, Bangladesh, and other places, they are suffering what we suffered growing up. They are realizing now how difficult it is in this country to raise a family and keep them in the faith. Sending children off to schools and colleges, and they come back not just transformed in their fashion, but in their spirits, and bringing or walking away from our Jamaat, getting involved in all kind of the same activities that our youth were involved in when our parents couldn't hold them. Going right back into the streets of America, into the American lifestyle, and leaving everything their parents had desired to build for their future. Imagine the pains of your parents right now, your elders right now, the prayers they offer for your own sake, those who are part of this second and third generation of immigrant families. The passion they're praying with, that seeing now slowly losing our youth to this society as we saw our youth being lost to the society, and understanding the appeal that was being made to them at that time, that now it's striking home. Now we realize what it means when your child goes off and marries someone outside your fold. Now we understand what it means when your child has left prayer and gone into the streets and involved in intoxicants. Now we know what it means when you're facing all these situations when you can't retain that spirit any longer. And so this is the time again for us as youth in Jamaat Ahmadiyya to recognize that we must stand very firm and pray very fervently that in the future we can retain those who are even amongst us, our own families, that we now stop this bleeding and bring back those who were on the sidelines and suffering, and minister them with love, with compassion, with understanding, not the harsh talk that, oh, where have you been for the last decades, or you don't know nothing, and this kind of thing. Just with a lot of compassion and understanding of what it was like for those parents, those elders, to try their best to keep their families in the fold, and to pray for them, and to pray for ourselves. With that, I leave you with one final clip. It's a message that was in the promotion for this program today, but it's not a promotional message. It's a message for deep, deep reflection. It's one I want us all to listen to very, very carefully, and to all the words and the spirit and energy behind this individual who was one of our Naib Ameer and longstanding presidents and great luminaries of the past century, speaking to Khuddam al-Ahmadiyya and speaking to Jamaat Ahmadiyya, what should be our way going forward.
La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah.
Now, why do you have to apologize for being a Muslim? You are an Ahmadi Muslim, the best of all Muslims. And you should never be ashamed of that. By the grace of Almighty God, when you leave here, you will have a great responsibility. That is to preach and protect Ahmadiyya. Protect it well. Protect it well. Because the future Allah is giving to you. The future is being given to you, but you must protect it. You must guard it well. You must be vigilant in your prayers. Vigilant in the reading and the recitation of the Holy Quran. You must try to imbibe all good acts and deeds into your personality. Don't be afraid to be known as a good person. Whatever you do, don't run from that. Because the future of the world lies with you.
So the Sahib, I think this brings my comments and thoughts and whatever I wanted to share to a conclusion. It's this last thought, the future of the world, as so beautifully articulated by our former Naib Ameer, Zafar Sahib. And it is one which, during the days when I would hear him speak, the words would roll like thunder from the heavens and hit your soul like lightning bolts, electrify you and make you feel as if you can do anything. Anything was possible. The world was definitely no challenge to one who was infused with the spirit of Islam Ahmadiyyat. In fact, it had to, like the angels before Hazrat Adam alayhi salam, when God said to submit to this, my Adam, you would feel the whole heaven and earth that you wanted to build now was at your beck and command, and that all was possible. This vision was not something that was going to be in the far, far off future, but was very near at hand. And this has to be, all I say is the understanding. The future is in the hands of this group, Khuddam al-Ahmadiyya USA, and wherever Khuddam may be, and wherever Ahmadiyya Jamaat is established. There is no other future for this world. If you can see it, let me know. I can never see it outside of this Jamaat. I can never see it outside of the members of this Jamaat, creating a revolution of spirit and moral values in our world. And as was said by the Holy Prophet Muhammad ﷺ on the battlefield of Badr, we talk about, as I said, our beloved Qutb mentioning over and over again the sacrifice of Badr, the critical moment of Badr. Well, where was he? He was inside that tent of his, praying to Allah Almighty, begging Allah Almighty, pleading that, oh Allah, if at this time this group to be wiped out, then there'll be no one left on the face of this earth to worship you and establish this kingdom for which you have raised me. My elders prayed like this for all of us. We must pray like this for those who are to come, and to carry the spirit of those Badr warriors into this nation now, with no fear and no concern, just that spirit to establish this mission as was done by our first generation of Ahmadis. It's in our blood. It's in, by Allah's grace, our souls. It's in our ears. It's before our eyes. Our Khalifa is telling us over and over again. May it now be in our deeds. May they be golden deeds, written for the next century to talk about, the deeds of the second century of Ahmadiyya USA, particularly by those who were part of Majlis Khuddam al-Ahmadiyya, inshallah. Jazakallah Sahib for giving me a few moments to spend with my very dear young brothers, nephews, colleagues, and may Allah have mercy on us and help us to fulfill the directive of our beloved Amir al-Mu'mineen in the spirit of our early missionaries and early converts, and bring about that change that he desires to see and he knows can be done if we work hard and pray hard and continue to push forward in this mission, inshallah. Ameen.
Ameen. Jazakumullah, Jaza, Naib Ameer Sahib. Inshallah, we will have the recording of this on our YouTube channel, Muslim Youth USA, for anyone that's not here today. I will ask Ameer Sahib to lead us in silent prayer, and we'll end the call after that.
Dua, please. Let us pray. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Ameen. Allahumma ameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.